speaker's time limit. The chief judge rules in the event of ties, objections, or contestations. The judge's total scores determine the best speaker and the winning team. Tonight's proposition: let it be resolved that local governments can evict illegal settlers from public land on the grounds of economic development. Starting off for the affirmative side is Sunny. Sunny, you have 4 minutes to argue the need for local government units to evict illegal settlers from public land for the purpose of economic development. Go ahead.
Land use optimization. Optimal use of the state's most valuable yet limited asset to benefit the most of Juan de la Cruz, as opposed to alleged interests of a few illegal settlers, is the main issue of this debate. Your Honors, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. In an archipelago occupied by 94.85 million people, the compelling need to optimize the use of land cannot be overemphasized. The adoption of a rational system of land use based on long-term interests of the community is therefore imperative. To achieve this end, eviction and relocation of a community of settlers occupying a portion of public domain undertaken within the bounds of law are sometimes inevitably resorted to. At present, legal bases to pursue this objective are in place. First, it is unquestionable that LGUs have this power to evict and relocate illegal settlers in its quest for the attainment of the community's economic development. Their authority emanates from Article 10, Section 2 of the 1987 Constitution in relation to Section 16 of the Local Government Code. Second, the manner by which their eviction and resettlement are to be undertaken are provided under Sections 28 and 29 of RA 7279, otherwise known as the Lina Law. This law assures that the method by which eviction and resettlement are made are carried out in the least violent and most humane methods. This includes prior consultation and provision of socialized housing for the qualified beneficiaries under the law. In other words, while the LGU has the power to evict, local government units also come with a correlative power not to evict. Hence, the local government units may undertake eviction only after consultation and deliberation with relevant government agencies under RA 7279 or the Lina Law. It is therefore in this light that we see the need for LGUs to exercise this power and authority, that is, to undertake eviction and resettlement of illegal settlers on the basis of economic development only and especially when the estimated revenue of such economic initiative significantly outweighs the cost and inconvenience of eviction and resettlement. While we endorse urban development and planning, we stand that eviction should be the last resort of LGUs after all options have been exhausted. Moreover, it is our stand that eviction shall only be made with the principles of restitution embodied under the Lina Law. The extent of economic development that justifies eviction can be gleaned in the Ayala-NHA joint venture agreement. Aside from the promises of economic growth out of the prospects of employment and trade for the local community, the development plan also incorporates housing for these informal settlers, albeit not in the original place of illegal settler shanties, but on a more strategic place where these settlers can be integrated as productive citizens of the state. In other words, to evict and relocate these illegal settlers in exchange in pursuit of the community's economic growth, such as but not limited to pursuit of employment, revenue, investment, generating activities, or income generating activities, significantly Yes, Your Honor.
Is economic development the same as economic growth?
No, Your Honor. Economic development is broader in scope. Economic growth is part and parcel of economic development. If you have no other questions, Your Honor, may I proceed? The success story of the state of Singapore is worth mentioning. Singapore, as early as 1950s, has adopted this principle of trade-off. Being an island city-state, it was once challenged with scarcity of land and natural resources. In the 1950s...
Sorry, Sunny. Time's up. Ice, 2 minutes now to cross-examine him.
Hi, good evening. Are you aware of the Bill of Rights?
Yes, I am.
Section 1 in particular?
Yes.
And are you aware that there is a hierarchy of rights? Life, liberty, and property.
That is correct.
And in this case, what we are balancing is the right to life of the illegal settlers and the right to property of the local government units. Correct?
Not necessarily, Madam
What do you
Speaker.
mean not necessarily? You're evicting them. You're depriving them of their very shelter. Aren't you depriving them of the right to life?
But this is not.
So you're saying that the right to property is heavier or should be placed at a more higher position than the right to life?
No, Madam Speaker. What the?
No, this is what you're arguing. You were saying a while ago that you can evict illegal settlers because you want to provide job opportunities. Because you're saying that this should be an income-generating activity.
Madam Speaker, the right to property or the right of the illegal settlers to have an abode is not totally diminished because they are actually relocated after such
Yes,
eviction
but
and
you're
demolition.
depriving them of their very life. Their livelihood is at their
Their life
state.
is not deprived, Madam Speaker. They're
But-
relocated and they're given another chance of life, given a better life after such relocation. I don't
No,
see
they're
your
not
point.
giving a better life because you're moving them away from their source of livelihood, correct?
You are not.
Oh,
So
you
you're-
mentioned a while ago that economic
The
development is very broad,
Madam
correct?
Speaker, the
You are
obligation of the
you're not answering. Did you assert that economic development a while ago is a broad standard?
correct.
Correct. Given that it is a broad standard, how do you expect the court to decide or the local government to exercise its discretion?
Madam Speaker, your
Are
argument
you
is
aware of
cannot
the sufficient
prosper.
standard test?
Of
Sufficient
course, but
standard
the
test
argument
provides
that they are
there should be no room for discretion or no room for arbitrariness for the court or for any deciding authority to decide over the matter, correct?
Yes.
And economic development, as you said a while ago, is broad in itself, correct?
Yes.
So aren't you saying that economic development does not satisfy the sufficient standard test? So how can you use it as a basis for eviction if it does not meet the sufficient standard test?
By the very police power that is granted by the
Police
local
power
government unit.
must also be exercised in accordance to due process.
That
You
is
still
correct.
have to follow a standard.
And there is
But as
the-
you answered a while ago, there's no standard in this case because economic development is broad, correct?
There is a standard for economic
Okay,
development.
break it up, guys. Ice, 4 minutes now to rebut Sunny and tell us why local governments cannot evict illegal settlers from public land on the grounds of economic development.
As admitted by the affirmative, economic development is a broad standard. We must remember that in today's motion, what we are balancing is the right of the illegal settlers to the right to life of the illegal settlers and the right to property of the local government units. Section 1 of the Bill of Rights is clear that there is a strict hierarchy of rights: life, liberty, and property. In SJS versus City of Manila, the court emphasized that the right to life must be afforded the highest protection. And in this case, if we listen to the affirmative's arguments, they're clearly asserting that the right to property weighs higher than the right to life. This is clearly misplaced. Further, if you look at Section 28 of the Lina Law, it clearly states that the local government unit can only evict illegal settlers under two grounds: when it involves danger zones, and two, when the government infrastructure has available funding. And the third ground is requires the issuance of a court order. Therefore, in this case, economic development should not and cannot be a ground for the local government authorities to evict illegal settlers. Nevertheless, even if a court order will be issued, the economic development still fails to meet the sufficient standard test. Yes, Your Honor.
Your mic, please. Thank you. So you're saying that you need a court order in order to evict a person whose life is in danger? Or even if the dwelling is nuisance per se?
No, Your Honor. Allow me to clarify my stand. When it involves the danger zone or when it involves professional squatters, then the local government does not need a court order. But in this case, economic development per se cannot be a ground because there's no sense of urgency. We are not protecting any other public interest, public service, or public welfare, which is present in both grounds. As first ground protects an imminent and grave danger and serves the public safety. And second, the government infrastructure, which has government funding, is a matter of necessity. As stated in Salute versus Philippine Expo, government infrastructure that has available funding is a matter of necessity for the government to implement such projects. In this case, given that economic development is too broad of a standard that it can cover anything that provides jobs or anything that is profit-oriented, such as hosting Olympics, creating sports complex or entertainment complex, clearly we cannot sacrifice the lives of the illegal settlers in order for us to achieve such economic growth. Therefore, Your Honors, I submit that the local government unit cannot evict illegal settlers and should not be allowed to evict illegal settlers solely on the base of economic development, as it is a too broad of a standard that would justify an arbitrary... Yes, Your Honors.
Is it your position that they cannot evict even if they can be relocated if the reason is just economic development?
Yes, Yes, Your Honors, it is our position. It is our position that economic development is not a sufficient ground to deprive the illegal settlers of their very right to life. It is an insufficient standard for us to sacrifice the very basic life of our co-Filipino citizens. And with that, I submit that local government cannot and should not be allowed to evict illegal settlers solely on the grounds of economic reasons, as this will unduly deprive them of their right to life. Thank you, Your Honor, and may it please the court.
Thank you, I. Sunny, 2 minutes now to cross-examine her.
Good evening. Hello.
Hi.
Does the local government unit have the right to exercise police power?
Yes, it does.
And is this is granted and recognized by the General Welfare Clause, correct?
Yes.
In fact, the text of the General Welfare Clause provides for an enumeration of these powers, correct?
Yes.
And is the enumeration exclusive?
Maybe, and not necessarily.
Precisely, because there are 3 classifications of powers granted under it, correct?
Yes.
Express, or those expressly granted by law; implied, or those that are necessarily implied from the express powers; and inherent, or those powers, later, Madam Speaker, or those powers necessary and proper for efficient and effective governance, correct?
But economic development cannot be
Yes or no,
implied
Madam
under the
Speaker?
law.
I am asking you a categorical
I'm
question. I'm not asking for your opinion. Yes or no?
I'm saying that economic development
I
is
take
not
that as
the
a
ground.
yes.
Even
If a
you look at
certain
the law,
power-
economic development
If a
is
certain
not
power, Madam
explicitly
Speaker,
stated.
just because it's not explicitly stated under 70 to 79, Madam Speaker, the enumeration therein
Really?
is
So
not
you're saying that the
exclusive.
local government
It
can
is my time
exercise...
to ask
Are you
Madam
aware of
Speaker,
the Dude versus
answer this
the
question.
Secretary?
If a certain power is not expressly granted in the statute, is it conclusive against exercise of such power by a local government?
Sorry,
Local
what?
government. If a certain power is not expressly granted in the statute, is it conclusive against the exercise of such power by a local government unit?
No, it is not.
Precisely. The power is essential to the promotion of the general welfare
Yes, but there is
that
a
it can
limitation.
exercise,
So
correct?
there must be sufficient standards.
I take that as a yes.
That
Does the Madam Speaker answer my question with a yes or no? I'm not asking for
the deciding authority
I
cannot
expect
add a
respect from
provision
the council
under the
from the
law.
negative side. Does the maintenance of peace and order involve promotion of general welfare, Madam Speaker?
Yes, but economic development
Is the
not
provision
part
of
public
employment
welfare.
among its residents part of promoting general welfare, Madam Speaker?
Residents?
No, employment of its residents.
Employment of its...
Okay, time's up, guys. Second affirmative speaker, Ina, you have 4 minutes to argue the benefits of allowing LGUs to evict illegal settlers on the grounds of economic development. Go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to compare the right of life versus the quality of life, because it seems that negative would rather let them rot there in the shanties where they live instead of relocating them and actually giving them a chance to eventually own the land. And another point, ladies and gentlemen, it seems that negative side wants to just tolerate the behavior of the illegal settlers by not evicting them, by not relocating them, by not giving them a chance at a better life. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, indeed, economic development is broad. It is broad enough to cover the 3 grounds under RA 7927, under the 3 grounds of eviction by which LGU can implement the eviction and demolition and subsequent relocation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, honorable judges, good evening. It really is most beneficial to use a prime public land by prioritizing the building of revenue and job-generating establishments. First, on a macro level, our model for the use of prime public land provides for a long-term and sustainable solution to illegal settlement. Although easy and popular, yes, Your Honor.
Can you cite an example where, or has there been an instance where illegal settlers have been evicted and relocated in a place where there's adequate transportation
Yes,
and
ma'am.
security?
As a matter of fact, there was a study conducted by Fulbright on the life of Joey, who started as an illegal settler and was then relocated. from Quezon City to Montalban, Rizal. And then he started from scratch and encountered the very same problems that other illegal settlers are experiencing right now. But because of hard work and cooperation with the rest of his community, he powered through the circumstances and he now owns the lot, has a stable job, and more importantly, he is not solely dependent on the government for his existence. Yes, he may not be a representative of the terms of number, but it shows that we can strike a balance between the government, the illegal settlers, and the economy as a whole. And that is holistic, sustainable, and real benefit. Now, second, let me get back. Although easy and popular, the macro level benefit of, as opposed to legitimizing the settlers' occupation over the land, it is merely a band-aid solution to the whole problem of striking an economic balance in the country. For my first argument, let's look at the joint venture agreement between NHA and Ayala to build a central business district in Agham Road. The public land, being strategically located within the vicinity of government offices, will be the best place to link and connect all the economic activities in Luzon. In a study conducted by NHA, the commercial district/transportation hub will provide at least 200,000 new jobs and billions of revenue. NHA will receive a significant percentage of the profits and will utilize it to double the number of relocation sites it originally aimed to build. Compare this to awarding the public land to these illegal settlers, simply because they appear to be pitiful or seemingly miserable, instead, even if the facts show otherwise. In a 2010 study, 80% of the income generating activities found in illegal settlers' communities is the operation of small-scale stores. And not only do these business endeavors fail to provide solutions to unemployment, revenue generated is undeniably minimal, if at all recorded and reported. Certainly, in our proposal, these small-scale stores can still flourish even if the settlers will be relocated elsewhere. A more dismal and unfortunate result arising out of this is the fact that the value of the prime public land will decrease as fast as how economic power of these illegal settlers will deteriorate. Clearly then, in terms of positive contribution to the economy, using a prime public land for building business districts not only translates to more benefit than cost to the community, it is also unarguably the most beneficial and optimal use of the private land. Asian Development Bank reported that proper use of public land has yielded to macro and micro... Excuse me, can I be given a few minutes to
your time's
wrap
up. Diego, 2 minutes now to cross-examine her.
Good evening, madam.
Good evening, Diego.
Just a few questions, please. I assume that you've read RA 729, the Lina Law.
Yes.
Are you aware of Section 28?
Yes.
What's it say about eviction?
There are 3 rounds, and there is also a procedure to follow.
What does it say about eviction as priority or as the last? Or
Enlighten me.
It says that eviction should be discouraged.
Discouraged but not prohibited.
But it should be discouraged.
Yes.
Thank you. Do you
Okay,
agree with
not
me?
prohibited.
Do you agree with me that eviction as a practice shall be discouraged based on that?
No.
But I just said that based on the Lina Law, it should be discouraged.
Discouraged
Thank you.
but not
Would you say
prohibited.
that there are other
Again.
alternatives to eviction?
Yes.
Would you say that relocation automatically improves the quality of the
In the long
individuals?
term, it is sustainable because they get to own the land eventually, meaning they won't have to
Miss Speaker, would you say
problematize
that?
about
Would you,
squatting
Miss Speaker,
or illegally
excuse me, Miss
settling
Speaker,
anywhere
would
else.
you say that this happens even in the long term? Would you say that this happens in all opportunity, in all situations, that their quality of life is improved?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Would you
your
say that in all opportunities, even long term, that the relocation will automatically improve their life?
question? It's a possibility.
It's a possibility, but not
Yes.
all times. Okay,
Of
thank
course.
you. Would you say that on-site development is an alternative?
Yes, but
Would
not
you
in
say,
this case.
thank you.
Qualified.
Would you say
Thank
would you say that the utilization of human capital is an alternative?
Sorry?
Would you say that the utilization of human capital in the area is an alternative?
No, sorry.
It is. Would you agree with me that eviction itself does not constitute economic development? Would you agree with me when I say that eviction itself does not create economic development?
It is a result and it is a cost.
Would you
also.
say that the grounds that the economic development is different from the grounds of wherein you can evict without a court order?
But the 3 grounds contribute to economic development. Let's not forget about that.
No, Miss Speaker, they do not.
Yes,
they do
yes,
not
they
contribute.
do. Come
They do
on,
not
Diego.
contribute. Thank you. Is expediency beneficial for all parties?
Expediency?
Would you say that?
Okay. Diego, 4 minutes now to rebut Ina and argue why it would not be beneficial to evict illegal settlers on public land on grounds of economic development alone.
Your Honors, good evening. Economic development is not exclusive to eviction. It is our assertion in the negative side that we can achieve economic development even without eviction while still balancing human rights. As beneficiality speaker, I have 2 points showing why it's necessary to evict in order not necessary to evict in order to attain economic development. First, the law itself, as stated, does not favor evictment, especially when it is possible and more beneficial to achieve economic development through alternate methods. And second, it is the best way to uphold the interests of all the parties. First, we must work with the premise that eviction as a practice is discouraged. I already stated in my interpolation that the Lena law itself and the implementing rules state that eviction should be the last resort, especially when there are possible alternatives, such as on-site development, which is already something given budgetary priority by the Lena law and implemented whenever possible in order to ensure the minimum displacement, as according to Section 9 and 26 of that law. We are encouraged by the successful implementation of on-site development in other countries. The affirmative side has mentioned Singapore. We also mentioned Sri Lanka, Brazil, and Kenya, which all showed that on-site development resulted in a statistical decrease in political bribery, in violence, and which has helped tremendously in changing the image of squatters into stakeholders. The point is, Your Honors, these countries make the settlers assets and not problems. When even our poor become productive, we will be able to turn what was once a disadvantage into advantage. There is mutual benefit. Secondly, the benefits we propose become paramount because of the ongoing incidents. We saw in the video the violence between the local government units and the illegal settlers. There is no guarantee that relocation automatically improves their quality. If that's the case, then why do they keep coming back? Instead of flashing, we can utilize their skills, centralize their existing livelihood with the progress of the area, and generally find other means to make it productive. This, in a sense, helps both parties. This is especially important because at present, the Philippines is the only Asian country where progress in development is indirectly proportional to the decrease in poverty levels. In other words, our rich become richer and our poor stay poor. With our proposal, we will be able to ensure that all sectors of the nation will develop and increase. Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Does your position encourage illegal settlers to pick out any public land and stay there because it's more difficult for the government to relocate them?
No, Ms. Speaker, we are not encouraging illegal settling at all. We only say that economic development is not exclusive to the premise of the alternative, where there is it's not with eviction. We're saying that it's not exclusive to theirs. Your Honors, at the end of the day, economic development is unsure. Either way, there is no guarantee that there will be gains through an economic endeavor. However, violating human rights through this eviction, through this ground, already is always a losing situation. The affirmative side would have us evict on the broad, arbitrary, and often abused ground of economic development, for the potential, not the certainty, of economic development, at the expense of the rights of the illegal settlers, which at the least have a right to humane disposition. The proposal of the negative side would create a way to stop the conflict, work together with the illegal settlers, and contribute as one unit towards economic development while still respecting their rights. In essence, the affirmative side presents a unsure win, sure lose proposal. The negative side, win-win. The most number of people benefit, the least harm is done, and Your Honors, that is the essence of beneficiality. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Diego. Ina, 2 minutes to cross-examine him.
Diego, imagine that this piece of paper is a parcel of public land.
I will.
Okay, thank you. Would you agree with me that that land is a limited resource?
No,
Land is not a limited resource in the
it
Philippines.
can be used.
But is it a limited resource? Anyway, okay, yes. Do you agree that it may be used for a variety of ways and purposes?
Yes, madam.
Of course. And that when you devote it to one use, it can no longer be devoted at the same time to another use?
Not necessarily, madam.
Okay, but when you devote it to a residential purpose, it may not yield the same level of productivity and revenue as when you
Madam, I
devote it to a commercial purpose.
Madam, I didn't know that
yes
when you take care
or no?
you...
Yes or no, Jago?
No, madam. No, madam.
No. In fact, but it seems also that productivity and revenue may also differ as regards the location of the land, correct? Location. Come on. Economics. Yes. Therefore, considering that land is a limited resource, we have to devote it to its optimal use, meaning where it would derive the most benefit, correct?
No, madam.
No. So,
Madam, would you say that profit automatically subrogates human rights?
Of
So we
course.
go
it's
for
not.
profit.
That's not
Thank
my
you.
point. My point is the optimal use of the land, which will yield more revenue, and sustainable development.
Exactly, madam.
Excuse
Revenue.
me, Diego,
Thank
are
you.
you aware that illegal settlers compose 2 out of 10 in the population in municipalities and cities?
Thank you for enlightening me.
Thank you. And therefore, to give way to the optimization of the use of public land, only a small fraction will be inconvenienced by way of relocation, correct?
Not necessarily, madam. They always come back.
By
So
way-
everyone...
No, that's a different case. Already 80% agreed to move. 6 out of 10 moved already.
So we should subrogate the rights of the 20%.
I presume that you have come across the benefits that RA 7279 mandates the LGUs to afford its relocated residents, correct?
Yes.
Have you? RA 7279 mandates that they be given access to potable water, correct?
Yes.
Yes. That they be given a stable source of security of electricity, correct?
Does this happen all the time?
But they are mandated, right? Yes.
Okay. Third, affirmative speaker Jonathan, you have 4 minutes to argue the practicability of evicting illegal settlers on the basis of economic development.
Good evening, Your Honors. Affirmative has shown the necessity and the beneficiality of its stance. I will be talking about the practicability. There are 2 primary arguments why our stance is practical. Firstly, the LGUs have the means, and secondly, the obstacles are more apparent than real. My first main argument concerns the means. My first sub-argument is that LGUs have the legal mandate. The Constitution, under Article 13, Section 10, gives the power to evict in accordance with law. This law is RA 7279. In addition, the Local Government Code gives LGUs power under the General Welfare Clause to perform acts for efficient and effective governance and for the promotion of general welfare and economic development. My second sub-argument is that LGUs have the resources. They have the police under their operational control and supervision. They have the necessary funds allotted under ERA, real property taxes, and special funds, including a 50 billion fund for urban poor resettlement. They have relocation sites such as Metropolitan Manila Development Authority Depot in Pasig City, the National Government Center Housing Project in Quezon City, and many others. Now I proceed to my second point, which is that the obstacles raised by negative are more apparent than real. Resistance on the part of illegal settlers is something we often see on television, as in the case of the Agham Road issue. Yes?
You said that the LGU has funds to evict illegal settlers, but do they have political will to evict them?
Your Honor, in this case, in our case, we have already made the assumption, such as in the Agham Road, that the LGUs have exercised the political will, as in the case of Mayor Herbert Bautista, who has exercised his will to evict. So, may I proceed back to my case? So, resistance on the part of illegal settlers is something we often see on TV, as in the case of the Agham Road issue. As to the actual existence of resistance, an investigation conducted by DILG regarding this issue showed that 8 out of 10 have already agreed to move out of the area, and 6 out of 10 have already moved out of Agham. Now, experience has shown to us that when the eviction and resettlement process is carried out strictly in accordance with law by the LGU officials, the risk of resistance is considerably lessened. In a study made by Habitat International and Asian Development Bank, the determining factor of a successful eviction and relocation is religious compliance to its guidelines. Despite this, we acknowledge that there will be a few who will not cooperate, especially those who are profiting immensely from syndicated squatting. In the same investigation conducted by the DILG, it was discovered that the primary source of resistance stems from syndicated squatters who earn millions every month through exploiting and extorting urban poor. When faced with such problems, local governments have the necessary power to deal with this. To end, we believe we should not allow criminals to exploit the noble intentions of the makers of our law and to make a mockery of the concept of property rights and social justice. We should not allow the selfish and illegal interests of a few criminals and opportunists masquerading as urban poor to prevent the optimal use of our land and impede the economic progress of the Filipino nation, which benefits not only the illegal settlers but the nation and the LGUs even. So with that, I end my affirmative speech. Now onto my rebuttal speech. A negative side would have us confuse this debate as an issue about depriving people of their right to life. But it is not about an issue of depriving them of the right to life. What we are depriving them of is the right to squat, which is not in fact a right to begin with. They are illegal settlers. Being illegal settlers, they have no right and no claim. Whatever benefit the government might extend to them is merely in line with social justice. But this social justice cannot be used to defeat the purpose of overall welfare and economic development of the nation. It cannot be used as a shield, which will prevent the progress of the nation as a whole and which will stifle our development and progress. Now, many nations have already sacrificed temporarily the sentiments of these urban poor in order to progress. Such as
Sorry,
Singapore.
Jonathan.
And this should be
Jonathan, your time's
same
up.
in our case.
Jackie, 2 minutes to cross-examine him.
Good evening. Is the strengthening of the peso economic development,
Yes.
is that capable of pecuniary estimation?
Yes.
So economic development is capable of pecuniary estimation,
Yes.
correct? Yes, remember your answer. I'm sure you'll agree with me that there are instances when the government can intrude into private rights, yes, correct?
Yes.
Are you aware of the jurisprudential definition of grave and immediate danger?
Yes. But
Indulge me,
I
please.
fail to see how this.
Indulge me, please. What
I
does it
fail
mean?
to see how this has
Just
any
indulge
connection.
me,
I
please.
fail to see how
Indulge
this
me.
any has
Anyway,
any
grave and
connection.
immediate danger means it's a damage that is not compensable by any amount of money. Then you are aware that since it's not capable of pecuniary estimation, then that's grave and immediate danger. Remember that.
Okay.
Do you think
I
these
will.
people have right to due process? You say they don't have ownership rights, but
They
they
have the right
right
to due process
Yes,
as
correct.
provided
Thank you.
for under the law.
Have you read?
RA 7,
Are you yes.
7279.
Thank you. Are you aware of Enot versus CA and Philippine Blooming Mills?
Please enlighten me as to those cases.
These cases tell us that any intrusion into private rights, such as due process, can only be justified by a showing of a grave
But
and
these are,
immediate danger.
we are assuming that
Since
there are
economic-
private rights to
since
begin
eco-
with.
since
Because they
econo-
have no rights to begin with. There is
Right
no
to
right
due
to squat.
process-
Right
right
to
to due-
squat, no such right
Right
to
to due
squat.
process is different from right of ownership.
Right to due process
Since
can be
economic,
improved-
since
can be
economic,
intruded
listen to me.
upon. Okay.
Since economic development is capable of pecuniary estimation, would you agree with me at the very least that it can never rise to the level of a grave and immediate danger? Since it's capable of pecuniary estimation.
We do not need to
Do you
justify
agree with
it
me?
under the grounds of a grave.
Just say
and
yes or
immediate.
no. Just say yes
I do
or
not
no.
need to agree
Just
with you
say
in
yes
this
or
case
no.
because what you are pointing towards is in
That's
fact
obviously a yes. Therefore, Your Excellencies,
White
obviously, economic development on its own can never justify any deprivation of due process of the citizens. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, with that, Jackie, 4 minutes now to rebut Jonathan and advance your argument on why it would not be practicable to evict illegal settlers on the basis of economic development alone.
Your Honors, good evening. What affirmative would have us believe is that protecting basic human rights and economic development are incompatible. Your Honors, we do not question the value of economic development. What we question is whether the means by which government seeks to achieve it is reasonably necessary. It is our position that the ground of economic development in itself is too broad to be left entirely to the discretion of the courts or the LGUs, thereby violating the right to due process of these citizens. In the case of People versus the Khoikhoi, the law was struck down as unconstitutional on the ground that the law itself did not give specific or designated limits, a violation of due process, Your Excellencies. It is not within the power of the court to determine for itself what economic development is, it being a political question. The court then is placed in an impossible situation because while it has the duty to protect the basic rights of these individuals, it is incapable of determining what economic development is. So unless the legislature makes a strict definition of what economic development is and there being sufficient standards, the court cannot interpret the law and economic, yes, Your Honor.
Can't the local government unit determine what economic development means and how implementation should be vis-a-vis that goal?
Thank you, Your Honor. While it is true that economic development is a political question, when governmental actions intrude into basic human rights, it necessarily becomes a judicial question. In Villavicencio versus Lucban, forcible eviction and relocation without due process, even of criminals, were found to be violative of human rights. The court said that though criminals, they are not chattels and must not be treated as such, but as citizens protected by the same constitutional guarantees. In the case of Philippine Blooming Mills, the court emphasized the primacy of human rights over property rights, and that for an infringement of human rights to be valid, the existence of a grave and immediate danger must be shown to exist. In this case, Your Excellencies, clearly no such danger exists. The Constitution mandates that eviction must be done in a just and humane manner, and according to People versus Liachon, This means that they must be evicted with due process, Your Excellencies. When governmental actions, as I said, intrude into private rights, it becomes a judicial question, and the government must show that the interests of the general public require such invasion of private rights, that the means be reasonably necessary, and that there be no other alternative less intrusive of private rights. Clearly, such requirements are not present in this case. The Constitution itself recognizes that illegal settlers, while not having ownership rights, nevertheless have rights that must be respected, such as the right to due process. That even violators of the law are entitled to humane treatment. The very existence of legal remedies reinforce the notion that illegal settlers are possessed of rights. Foremost among them are the rights to the quality of life and due process. The right to possession of one's land needs to be balanced with basic human rights. In conclusion, Your Excellencies, we say that allowing LGUs to evict illegal settlers on the ground of economic development, broad as it is, Your Excellencies, subject to arbitrariness, essentially gives the LGUs unlimited power, leaving the dwellers defenseless. And with that, Your Excellencies, the negative respectfully rests its case.
Thank you, Jackie. Jonathan, 2 minutes now to cross-examine her.
Okay. Do you think that tolerating illegal settlers promotes respect for the rule of law?
We're not tolerating them. We're just saying,
Are you
give them
saying,
due process.
No. Are you answer that with a yes or no?
Yes.
Illegal settlers.
No, what we're saying, we're not against
Let me proceed.
eviction, Mr. Speaker.
Are you aware
we
that
are
under,
pro due
Are you aware
process.
that under the Constitution, specifically Article 13, Section 10, the urban poor may be validly evicted? Are you aware?
Yes.
Excellent. Have you read Section
Provided there's
16
due
of the
process.
Local Government Code?
Yes.
Does it not provide that local government has the necessary powers to
We
perform
are not against eviction, Your
to perform
Excellencies. We just say that
to
it
perform
has
acts
to be
that will
balanced
enhance
with
economic
the right
prosperity?
to due process and quality of life.
Are you not aware?
Yes, I agree with all that you just said.
Does having illegal settlers occupying prime strategic public lands enhance economic prosperity?
We are not against
I'm
eviction, Your
asking you that
Excellencies.
question. I'm asking you that question.
Can you
Does
please
it?
repeat that?
Okay. Does
I'm getting
having illegal
confused with all your
settlers
questions.
occupying prime strategic public lands enhance economic prosperity? Does it do so?
We are not against eviction, Your Excellencies.
Are you aware of the DILG study that shows that 8 out of 10 illegal settlers along Agham Road have already agreed to relocate?
Okay.
Are you also aware that in this same study, it was shown that most of the resistance from the remaining 2 out of 10 settlers could be traced back to illegal squatting syndicates?
Illegal squatting syndicates
Are you aware?
different
Yes.
from
Are you
illegal
aware?
settlers.
Are you aware?
The law itself
Are you
makes
aware
a
of the study?
distinction.
Are you aware of the study? Yes or
It's
no?
irrelevant because
Okay.
professional syndicates are
Aware.
different.
So do you
from
think
illegal
squatting syndicates should be allowed to continue unpunished?
Are they the same as illegal settlers?
Are you
That's
do
not
you
within
are
the
you of the
motion,
opinion
Mr.
that
That's
should
not
be the
within
case,
the
that
motion.
they should not be
It's
punished?
It's not the
So
same.
based on your answers, you would also agree with our stance that we should not allow squatting syndicates masquerading as ordinary illegal settlers to prevent evictions and stop economic development, correct?
On professional syndicates, I agree. Illegal
Yes, exactly.
settlers, I do
As
not agree.
was found out in this case.
Professional syndicates, I agree. Illegal settlers, I do not agree.
Okay, thank you, guys. Let's take it down a notch. Time now to make up. With that, we invite both sides to cross the house as our judges tally the scores. Square off season 7 from debates. Return after these messages.